Hello, this is the My Artifact episode number 4000, 4137. Yeah, 37. Today's date is July 4, 2026. It's been almost like a morning at 7:54 a.m. By the way, the whole weather is a kind of like a cloudy. Like, let me tell you. So this is the entire kind of like a something. The weather is fully covered by cloud, and these are very dense cloud. That means the rain will kind of like a happen soon and very too much. Okay, and basically this weather is a kind of like I love that weather. Is because of that key. Like it's really good. Okay, like it's really good means like that key. Like it's a monsoon. Okay, and like every time there is a monsoon I have to kind of like a just took a bike and kind of like a take off and kind of like spend time with the friends and kind of like things and enjoy the monsoon things and that. Yeah, but the problem is that right now I don't really have any friends. I have, okay, it's not really that I don't really have. I have, but all my friends are actually gone. They are kind of like getting married. They are like basically most of the out of the town and things like that. I am the only one who is actually at the home. So yeah, whatever. Okay, it's not really that kind of like it is, but still the monsoon is a kind of like a really good. All right, should we jump into the question? All right, let's go. All right, so question is wait. What metric proves success? All right. Okay, first of all, what is at least this question and why am I asking this question to myself? I wanted to build an app called My Artifact. What is at least this application? And okay, this frame is kind of like a much more better. Okay, yeah, because the shadows and like lights and shadows and it kind of like creates a yeah whatever. What kind of like a metrics do I? Okay, what is at least this question? Okay. I wanted to build an application called My Artifact. Okay, what is at least this application? When you write the diary every single day, you cannot able to be write the diary the way that you wanted to. The reason is that your writing speed is much more slow. Your thought process actually much more faster than your writing speed. Your writing speed is actually slow is because of you need a pen, you need a paper, you need a convenience, and even after that you need to put lot of amount of effort to print your thoughts. I'm saying print your thoughts, and because of it kind of like it takes so much amount of effort to write the diary. That's why almost no one is actually writing a diary, almost nothing really at all. But what if instead of kind of like a writing a diary, what if we could record a diary, like a audio record a diary? The stuff that you are kind of like listening right now, this is my audio diary. I called it My Artifact. My Artifact episode number 4137. I am doing this thing for past 11 years. I am doing this thing every single day because of writing a diary is a self-reflection process. So as recording a diary, so as recording an artifact is a self-reflection process. It add so much amount of value in myself. The person that I'm became today, the person that I will become tomorrow, it is all because of artifact. The amount of value it add inside of me, I wanted to share this value to the people. How do I supposed to do that? By building an application. My application is somewhat something like a YouTube platform. In a YouTube you kind of like upload your video, other people kind of like sees your video. Same thing, you kind of like record your artifact, upload your artifact in artifact platform. Other people kind of like listen your artifact. There is only one catch is that your privacy is always kept hidden. Sorry, your identity is always kept hidden. Like basically my real name is Saurabh Othare, but my artifact handle name would be Prozac 1943 or something else, so that my privacy is always kept hidden. Before I wanted to build this application, I wanted to aware of all the possible consequences, specifically worst possible consequences. So I went to ChatGPT and I tell my idea and tell him that he suggests me hundreds of worst possible consequences in question format. ChatGPT kind of like suggests me those 100 question This is one of those question, by the way, question actually in the mobile phone, but while recording I cannot able to do this thing, so I write question here. All right, so this question it says that key, how do I prove the success, like, sorry, what metrics prove the success in my artifact. Okay, it's a kind of like a very confusing question, but it's not confusing question. Okay, yeah. Now success is a kind of like a very, like a very, like a very kind of like a something like a term where kind of like a defined very differently. Okay, yeah. I am building an application. Okay, so what is exactly my success, like what is exactly, like what should I supposed to be say that I get success for artifact application. Simple is that ki having more user, right? Like a more user means like that more advertising money, sorry, more advertisers, more advertiser, more money, right? So consider as a kind of like a success, that means more user I have, that means more success I have, right? Well, technically, yeah, that is true. But problem is that na ki, like basically my source or my motive is not to earn money. Like basically, I am building this application to not to just earn money. I want to earn money. That is, yeah. It's not really that I don't really want to earn money. I understand the consequences of artifact. I understand what is the value that user will kind of like a get when they record the artifact. I understand what is actually artifact value it providing and how much it kind of like a shape their personality, their internal structure and things like that and that. It's not a typical Facebook or Instagram that you post a video or short and things and that. No, artifact is a kind of like a very different. When people who kind of like a record the artifact and when the people who are kind of like a recording artifact every single day, it shaped their personality, it shaped that who are they, what they wanted to become and things like that. Artifact is a kind of like a assembly application where if you are recording artifact every single day, you are kind of like a became more the person that you are talk about in the artifact. Example, if I record artifact, if I kind of like a talk about physics in artifact, I will become physician, or maybe higher possible chances that I would become associated with the science or physics. If I'm kind of like a somebody talk about the economics, higher chances that I will kind of like a become economics or kind of like a financial advisor, or yeah, like that is a really good thing, right? Yeah, but let me tell you one thing, some people are not utilizing for that purpose. Like some people are kind of like a, let's just say they will kind of like a record artifact regarding about something that he, there are so many birds. I am completely confused that why just tiny bird kind of like a create that much amount of sound. Like I knew that it's a kind of like a vocal cords and things like that and that. So it's really good. Yeah, still. Yeah. Oh my god. And they're literally flying above me. Now they are going that way. Basically there is a lot of trees over here. Like basically you are kind of like a sea over trees, and there are so many trees over there too. Okay, yeah. So they have kind of like a lot of nest, and probably is this thing that na ki the birds are actually a kind of like a celebrity. Like do you know that birds are celebrate too? Yeah, birds are celebrate too. They are kind of like a celebrity. Okay, what do you mean the birds are celebrating? Okay, I'm not really sure is it celebrating or is the kind of like a chaos sound, but I heard somewhere like basically is this thing during the monsoon, the birds are kind of like a something just cow 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 is because of that ki they are kind of like a losing their kids or lost their nest, or maybe they are kind of like getting abundant amount of food probably. probably they are not kind of like celebrating, they are kind of like in the chaos, maybe where because of the monsoon kind of like their nest was kind of like a destroyed. I'm not really sure. Probably birds are celebrating, but I don't know. All right. Now I always get confused regarding about that how that tiny birds. Literally, this bird is this much tiny. Like literally, if you like basically wingspan, it would be that like a probably almost like a foot. Okay, yeah. If the span the wing, if you remove the sting, then this bird is kind of like a look like that. Like literally just so tiny. Whatever. Okay, yeah. Success. Yeah, success. Okay. What metric do you kind of like a prove that you are kind of like getting a success? Well, the simple logic is that he getting higher viewers or higher number of users, right? But I have to be think about that key artifact is a kind of like a simply a power that could shape the personality. Okay, as I already mentioned, the person who kind of like a talk about the physics or science, that particular person became scientist. Particular person talk about the economics will become financial advisor. Whatever the person who is actually talking about something really good, the particular person who are kind of like a became more that particular person. Okay, the stuff that he was kind of like a talking. Okay, that is really good thing, right? But yeah, but also is this thing now the particular person who is kind of like a talking about something not so good, like a, let's just say sex or maybe kind of like a I don't know something not right. Okay, topic. That particular person will kind of like a simply became rapist too. The particular person who kind of like a talk about the sex, that particular person will kind of like a became rapist too. And this is also power of artifact too. Artifact is a kind of like a enhance the whatever that you have. If you have talk about the physics, you are became the physician. If you talk about the economics, you are became financial advisor. If you talk about kind of like a good habits, self development, self help and things like that, you are became kind of like an author or kind of like a spiritual guru or whatever it is. You are talk about the kind of like a mechanics or things and that you are become the engineer. If you talk about the medicine and things, you will become doctor. Like this is what kind of like a power it has. Artifact, the whatever you actually talk, you became that particular person. And same thing, if you talk about the sex or whatever the kind of like a things, you will become rapist too. Yeah. So artifact is actually kind of like a somebody enhance the whatever the quality that you have. And that's a kind of like a very challenging for me is that key I don't want that key people should supposed to be record something not so right thing. Okay, yeah. Because like basically from like a basically I am the kind of like a build this application. Okay, yeah. I don't really worry about what does people say and things and that. Okay. And from that point of perspective, I just kind of like somebody just kind of like earn the money and kind of like a fuck off the people whatever they are kind of like doing with their life and things and that. I was kind of like a build the application and things and that. Why do I supposed to worry about what does people say and things and that? Well, that is true. Yeah, why do I supposed to be care? Like basically, I build the application. Okay, people whatever they wanted to say things and that. But no, that is not. I don't want that people should supposed to be talk about something that not right, and that is what kind of like a artifact philosophy is actually giving. I realize that key I will like basically what exactly is this thing? How is actually happened? Like who will actually decide that key what they will gonna talk and things like that. Now let me tell you one thing. Artifact is a kind of like a things that people will kind of like at the beginning people will kind of like a talk about the whatever they are kind of like been through their life and things and that. Okay, yeah. But one of the biggest kind of like a crown jewel of my application is a question. I'm giving people a kind of like a direction to talk. And what is actually the direction of the talk? A topic to talk. Let's just say I have kind of like a bunch of topic that kind of like a really enhance the kind of like a personality much more better way. Let's just say kind of like a something that key I will ask the question. Like basically my application does have kind of like a simply the question like when the user kind of like a hit the record artifact. In the top of the screen there is a kind of like a question pop-up. That question is a kind of like a simply is this thing. I am disturbed by birds. Probably. Whatever. Okay, so that question is a kind of like a define the what kind of like a person who's actually talking about things and that. So basically, this, if the question kind of like a says this thing, that key, what is exactly your opinion regarding about success? Okay, yeah. Now that is a really good question, right? Like basically someone kind of like asking kind of like some opinion regarding about the success, and people are kind of like a giving their value regarding about the success and things and that. Now let me tell you one thing, what is actually impact of that. Okay, yeah. Why am I kind of like saying this question as a crown jewel? Because let me tell you one thing, when people, like if I have kind of like a suddenly this is the kind of like a question I like add in the application, and let's just say a kind of like a millions of people who are kind of like a recording artifact, and millions of people who are kind of like a giving the opinion regarding about the success. Let me tell you one thing, from one question, literally just one simple question, what is defines success from your point of perspective, I have kind of like something almost millions of kind of like something thought process regarding about what does millions of people think about success, what is actually this and that and that and that. Okay, yeah. Now what will gonna happen, let me tell you one thing, when millions of people actually talk about the success, they are kind of like a something. Okay, yeah, this question is a kind of like a, it's not really that kind of like some stuff. Okay, yeah, let's talk about something now that is kind of like a you resonate, you understand, and basically I'm kind of like easy to explain. Okay, yeah. So let me kind of like tell you something. Let's say take a kind of like a this book. Okay, yeah, Principia of kind of like a Mathematica by kind of like a Isaac Newton. Okay, yeah. So I asked the question that key, um, who is a genius, Isaac Newton or Albert Einstein? This is a kind of like a question it pop up. Okay, yeah, Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein. And because of I asked this question, millions of user will kind of like give the answer. And how they will kind of like give the answer, they will kind of like see the question and kind of like say this thing, okay, this is a kind of like a question and I have to give the answer. So even if some people doesn't know the Isaac Newton and kind of like a Einstein and things, they will might kind of like give the kind of like opinion, because those are the people are kind of like somewhat something very much popular. Okay, yeah, like historical figure. Okay, and everyone have kind of like a little bit opinion regarding about that. Okay, yeah, some people opinion are kind of like a way much scientific, some people are kind of like a very less scientific, some people are kind of like a nothing really at all, like kind of like it just doesn't really make sense at all. Okay, yeah. So let's take a kind of like a three category of the question, sorry, three category of answer did I get. The answer, like basically the question it kind of like says a difference between the Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein. Okay, yeah. Regarding about if I ask the question to the millions of user, the millions of user have kind of like a different answer. First answer is that answer doesn't really make sense at all. This defines the people who doesn't really know about the who is Einstein, who is Isaac Newton. Yeah, these are doesn't really make sense. These are the people who are kind of like a talk about something but kind of like a mild information. Okay, just gravity and kind of like Einstein, things like that and that. And these people are kind of like a really expert in the kind of like somebody talk about the science and things. They will talk about the kind of like a double slit experiment or kind of like something the gravity and kind of like something, yeah, a lot of kind of like good stuff. Okay, so do you understand? Three kind of like an opinion it creates regarding about who is actually better, Isaac Newton or like a Albert Einstein. Okay, now basically I'm not kind of like basically focus on kind of like somebody the answer, because every answer is a kind of like a very different regarding about every person point of perspective regarding about whatever the knowledge that it has. Okay, yeah. But do you understand the impact of it? Okay, what is that impact? Because I asked the question, okay, the simple question, who is actually better, Isaac Newton or Albert Einstein? And let's just say millions or a couple of hundreds of millions will kind of like somebody record their answer. Let's just say a kind of like 100 million people who are kind of like giving the answer regarding about this question. Now regarding about people, whatever the kind of like option or whatever the kind of like answer that they have doesn't really make sense at all. But what I'm trying to tell you, 100 million people will talk about something about science, that they never really been. 100 million, have you ever understand how much big number was that? Okay, 100 million people are actually talking about the kind of like somebody Isaac Newton. So 100 million people talking about the Albert Einstein. 100 million user kind of like talking about the comparison between those and things and that and that. What I'm trying to tell you is this thing, what has actually happened. Like, let me tell you one thing. The 100 million people are kind of like a talk about this question. Then what is actually their shifted thought process to looking up towards the science. Okay, what has actually happened? Like, basically this thing, artifact is a kind of like a tool that change the perspective, not only the humans but entire cluster of human, because the ecosystem actually created 200 or 100 million of people are talking about the kind of like somebody Isaac Newton or Albert Einstein or whatever it is. What will gonna happen? They will talk, they will kind of like understand, and then they will kind of like somebody try to think about they wanted to know more or they wanted to kind of like things and that and that. 100 million out of maybe some people will kind of like buy the book. 100 million out of some people will kind of like watch YouTube video regarding about what Isaac Newton discovered, what Einstein discovered. 100 million out of some people who are kind of like a talk about something really kind of like a gravity. They are kind of like somebody talking about, or they are kind of like thinking about scientific stuff very much like a very much like a like basically this thing. Now, if I like, it's a kind of like a things. The hundreds of million people are kind of like scattered and things and that and that. They have different thought process, things and that. I give them a direction, just a kind of like a direction. Talk about Isaac Newton or Albert Einstein. 100 million or 200 billion or whatever it is, they are kind of like a talk about this thing. The kind of like the pyramid scheme actually happened. Okay, yeah. Like, what's exactly pyramid scheme? A pyramid scheme is that key when 100 million or 200 million people talk about the kind of like a scientific stuff, out of those kind of like a couple of million people will kind of like do something much more better in that particular thing. Like they might gonna read the book or watch YouTube videos or things like that. Out of those couple of thousand people are kind of like do something better in the things. They might kind of do the experiment to understand the kind of like assembly the Newton's laws or Einstein laws and things like that and that. And out of that couple of people, maybe kind of like 100 or maybe kind of like 10-20 people are kind of like do something so incredible regarding about the scientific point of perspective regarding about things, because of I asked the question today. Okay, yeah. Okay, this pyramid scheme takes time. Okay, it takes time. It takes time. Like, it's not like that I kind of like ask the question and things actually happen. No, it takes kind of like years. I ask the question, then people are shifted the direction, and that direction kind of like it takes pyramid from bottom to slowly top, and it takes kind of like a decade of time and things and that and that. Obviously, it's not just a one question, but kind of like somebody there are multiples of kind of like information that they gather and things and that and that. And basically, the people who are before very scattered, right now I kind of like give the direction that what they should supposed to be talk. This is the power of artifact. And okay, let me tell you one thing. It is kind of like a things that it doesn't really require a kind of like a border or kind of like a things or nothing really at all. I'm just kind of like ask the question. It on the digital world, people are kind of like a recording answer, and they will become a kind of like a somewhat something associated with this thing. Like, basically, see, if I ask the one question, I create the influence regarding about science and things and that and that. Okay, yeah. Like, basically, let me tell you one thing. You don't really understand. Okay, let's just say a kind of like a Indian government is a kind of like a somebody came to me, okay, yeah, and say this thing that he, sir, basically in your application there are almost like a millions of people are using your application. Okay, so what I want is that key change the influence. Like, basically change the influence means like that key I want that key like basically people who should supposed to be become more doctor. Okay, so kind of like an influence in that way. So let me tell you one thing. I could do that thing. I just literally kind of like give them such a question regarding about medicine or science or things and that. People are actually talk about the medicine and science and things and that. Higher chances that those people will kind of like become doctor or somewhat something associated with the medicine. Okay, by just asking one simple question. Okay, now I am utilizing my artifact for right purposes, right? I can use my artifact for wrong purposes too. How? Okay, you don't really understand. Okay, let me tell you one thing: how much power that I hold. If I want that key US government has a kind of like a how a party, let's just say a Republican party or Democratic party is a doesn't really suit me for my companies and things and that. What exactly I can do? I can do that key. I have kind of like a assembly the American people, what they are kind of like a talking. I'm kind of like a shifted. Who do you think which is better, Republican or Demographic? Literally just one ask. And I ask this question to the American demographic people, and they will gonna talk debates and things and that and that and that. I can create a chaos by one single question into the US and kind of like destroy their entire kind of like somebody the government. Just one simple question. Do you understand? So this is power that I'm holding from Artifact, and basically it is one of the biggest responsibility, and obviously I don't want to use that thing. I don't want, and this is kind of like I'm really scared. That why am I so scared? Because of that am I doing right thing or wrong thing? Like example is this thing from point of perspective. If I ask the scientific question, or if I kind of like only give the question to the user to kind of talk about the scientific things, it's really good thing, right? But who do you decide what is actually good and what is right? Okay, yeah, it's a kind of like a things. Okay, like who kind of like somebody give me rights to kind of like somebody give the question regarding about the what is actually US government and what is actually the kind of like somebody Republican and demographic, what is actually existing and that. I am not a kind of like a US citizen, I'm the Indian citizen. But because of the kind of like a one prompt or one question, it kind of like disturb the entire kind of like a government and things and that. So who gave me rights to do this thing, right? Because you build the artifact? Probably, yeah, but is this thing that na ki I don't want to kind of like a simply like use this power. Okay, yeah. Or maybe I wanted to use this power for like at least right purposes, not wrong purposes. And that is a kind of like a very challenging thing for me. That is that key. Let the people kind of like a record artifact as much as kind of like somebody better things. But I'm really scared. Okay, scared about what? Scared about that key, like I will not gonna use artifact for wrong purposes. That is for sure. That is true, right? But because I am holding this much amount of power, people are scared of me. And when the people are kind of like scared of me, they want that key I will not have that much amount of power. Okay, if you not really understand, let me kind of like tell you. Because I'm creating artifact, I kind of like a shifted millions of people mindset by kind of like a just simple asking question. Okay, simple asking in artifact. Okay, millions of people. Now, does government are kind of like a believe in me? Like if I'm kind of like a say this thing that I'm kind of like a utilize artifact for right purpose and things and that. Let's just say a kind of like a US government will kind of like a say, prove me that you are kind of like a utilizing your artifact for right purposes, or prove me that you are kind of like a utilize artifact that kind of like a does not collapse the US government or any other government or things and that. Now in that thing, how do I supposed to give the answer? How do I supposed to tell them that I will kind of like a utilize artifact for right purposes and I will not going to disturb the any government policies or nothing really at all, just things and that, right? It is far more easier to say, and I will kind of like do this thing. I will kind of like making sure that my platform will not kind of like create chaos in another kind of like things and that, right? But it's just empty words. Why? Because of that, how do I like basically as I mentioned is this thing. Even if I'm kind of like say this thing, okay, that even I didn't really ask the question, like basically who is better, demographic or Republican? Okay, I didn't really ask this question. Okay, yeah. But does people will ask the question? It's not really that I will decide the question. The user can also ask the question to themselves too. Okay, yeah. So imagine one particular US citizen kind of like only record an artifact regarding about who is actually better, demographic or kind of like only the demographic or Republican. Okay, yeah. Now because of they ask, and other people are resonant, the US people who are kind of like a resonant, and they also wanted to ask the same question, okay, to themselves regarding about who is actually better and things and that. So in that context, government will might gonna collapse, because let's just say this spread virus, kind of like a millions of people will kind of like a talk about things and that, and they are kind of like a talk about this thing in artifact application, and which is kind of like I am responsible. I didn't really ask the question, user are actually asked this question to themselves. Okay, yeah. And I didn't did anything at all, but still I get the blame because of that key, because of your application the kind of like a chaos started in your country and things and that. Yeah. So that is a kind of like a thing. That's why I am really scared. Okay, yeah. That's why I'm kind of like really scared that I will not gonna give the kind of like a solely ownership right to the kind of like a people who are kind of like investing money on my application. Okay. Also is this thing that I have to be kind of like a create a protocol regarding about that people should supposed to be kind of like a talk about something really good, right, better for themselves, for their people, from their kind of like a perspective, from their growth and things and that. But still the growth is kind of like a very delusion. Let me tell you one thing, some people are kind of like a getting growth because of the kind of like destruction of another country. So basically how do you define the growth? Okay, yeah, the growth, like a weapon industry is kind of like a getting growth because of the wars. So basically the people who are kind of like a talk about the weapons and things and that means they want kind of like a wars and things and that, which is completely wrong, right? So how do you define growth for every citizen or every person on the planet? This is kind of like a really shit. This is kind of like something that I am really scared. I'm kind of like a shivering right now. Okay, and not because of the question, because the cold weather and things like that. Okay, yeah. So do you understand how much power that I'm holding right now? So what do I supposed to do? What is actually my protocol? What is actually existing? What is actually my kind of like things? Well, I have a kind of like a judgmental system. I already mentioned regarding about judgmental system. Okay, yeah. My application, every artifact is actually judged by kind of like a some AI called Adam. Okay. Now basically it's this thing, do you kind of like a rely on kind of like AI to kind of like a somebody change the entire kind of like a perspective of a human perspective, or kind of like a somebody entire nation perspective to rely on AI, rely on Adam? Well, technically there is only one way. Like it's not really that kind of like a humans are kind of like a listening artifact, they will kind of like a judge, like almost like a basically every artifact actually judged by the kind of like a human and AI. It's not kind of like entire Adam and things like that. Okay, so what is actually this thing? What is actually that judgmental system will actually work? Okay, yeah. I allow to user to record anything that they want. That is true. Talk about anything. I'm making sure that you will kind of like talk about something really good and things and that. Okay, but people have their thoughts, things. They have kind of like whatever they wanted to talk, they will kind of like talk. Now basically I have to make sure that is their artifact, or the people who are kind of like a recording artifact, does it right for them? Does it right for the society? Does it right for their nation? Does it right for their surrounding? Does it right for, yeah, like basically this kind of like a very important thing. If the particular person who is actually talking about who is actually better, demographic or Republican, obviously I will not gonna kind of like recommend this artifact to the more and more people. Why? Because that is not right. Because let me tell you one thing, it create the kind of like a simply the kind of like a simply patterns, like a kind of like a things, which group am I and which group, like a basically is this thing, I love Republican or I love demographic. Do you realize what it exactly it means? Example, I love Republican, that means I hate demographic. I love demographic because I hate Republican. When you love something, you hate something. When you love something, you hate something. That is kind of like a thing. Okay. So if the people who are kind of like talking about this thing, they are kind of like creating chaos. Okay, yeah. And that is the kind of like things I don't want. So if the people who are kind of like talk about something, that politics or things and that, who is actually better and who is that and that, these artifacts, you can talk, yeah, but that artifact will not kind of like recommend to the more and more, because it's kind of like a disturb the things. Adam will try to understand, analyze that what might gonna consequences happen, because if that artifact went viral too. Wait, how does artifact went viral? There is like basically this thing, there is another thing. Let me tell you one thing. Artifact is a kind of like a things that there is no processing actually happen. No one is kind of like editing, no one is adding the background music, no one is kind of like a things and that. Why does it make viral? Well, the problem is that na ki virality is not depends on how good is the video. The viral is kind of like a depend on what exactly the person actually talk and things and that. We are humans, we are kind of like a connected with another humans and things and that. And because of we are kind of like a connected by, we are kind of like a listening what does other people and things and that. So that's what kind of like a things, the when the more people are kind of like a talk about something that most of people actually resonate, it became viral. Even if the kind of like a somebody the artifact, it doesn't really have any kind of like a sense, or kind of like a lot of background music, or kind of like a stupid background, or kind of like a talking about this thing like that, right? So that is the kind of like a things, it became viral. So basically it is kind of like a really essential for me that key, whatever the people who are kind of like using the artifact, I have to make sure that key they will utilize artifact for right purposes, not for wrong purposes. And who will decide? Adam will decide that what is actually right and what is actually wrong. And that's the kind of like a things, okay, yeah, because in the human point of perspective, it is usually, it is easy to understand what is actually right and what is actually wrong, because human understand. How do I supposed to train Adam to understand what is right and what is wrong? And that's the kind of like a challenge for me, because if I train Adam what is right and what is wrong, then I have to be kind of like a make sure that things. But how you kind of like a train Adam to think that what is actually right and wrong? That's the kind of like a came Adam simulation, okay, yeah. Like basically this thing I already mentioned, okay, yeah. Adam simulation is a kind of like Adam is a AI can predict the future, okay, yeah. It's a sound so kind of like a cinematic, right? Okay, yeah. It's not like that, okay. So let me tell you one thing, okay. Adam, I will not gonna talk about the Adam simulation. I talk multiple times and things and that. But what is at least this thing? I'm kind of like a jump into the direction. When the people who are kind of like a talk about something, let's just say same, demographic or Republican, particular person who kind of like a record artifact regarding about who is actually better, demographic or Republican, things and that. Now, what exactly happened when that artifact process into the Adam try to simulate, okay, simulate that key. Is this question is this artifact, the particular person who kind of like a talk about this particular stuff, is it right, is it wrong, or how many people who are kind of like engaged with that thing? Let's just say at the beginning, let's just say couple of hundreds of thousands of people who are kind of like somebody resonate with that thing, okay. So basically Adam will try to analyze that what is that particular person says, and why does kind of like it resonate with the thousands of people, okay, yeah. And kind of like a making sure that if it kind of like a resonate, how much it kind of like a simply add value, or kind of like a decrease the value in the future. It kind of like a do the simulation, like basically if this artifact kind of like a resonate of hundreds of thousands of people. So if those hundreds of thousands of people who are kind of like giving the kind of like opinion regarding about that, then what might gonna happen? What is at least this thing? It create the simulation. It try to predict that what will gonna happen in the future, okay, regarding about what is actually they say in the previous past, what is actually their kind of like things and that, because of their kind of like a recording artifact, because of their kind of like I have data regarding about that what they are kind of like somebody have thought process, what is actually their opinion. If they are kind of like somebody that talk about if they are kind of like giving the opinion regarding about the kind of like a political and things and that, what might their opinion and things and that. Adam try to simulate the things, and also Adam is also kind of like take the information from the real world, from the internet, that does something actually happen in the real world, that people are actually talking about the demographic and Republican and things and that, okay. So it simulate the scenario, it simulate that what might gonna happen if this consequences still happen, like a 1 to couple of hundred to couple of thousand, and from thousand to couple of million to kind of like a things, what kind of like a pattern. It try to determine the pattern and create the prediction pattern, that what might gonna happen if it's continue, it's this trend is kind of like a became continue, what might gonna happen, okay, yeah. And from that, whatever the kind of like a somebody Adam will find, it try to understand that if something that create chaos, or it kind of like a create something wrong, or it create kind of like a break the humanity, or kind of like a wrong for the humanity, or kind of like a disturb their economic cycle, or kind of like a government cycle, because of this kind of like a simple thing, Adam try to reduce the recommendation as much as possible, okay, yeah. Adam will not gonna recommend your artifact to the less and less people. It kind of like it try to minimize as much as possible, okay, yeah. And this is how Adam work, to kind of like a maintain the balance between the humanity thought process and kind of like a much more better and things and that. Okay, yeah, I am not training Adam what is actually right and wrong. I am giving the kind of like a something the instruction that key whatever the kind of like artifact you have to recommend the right artifact which kind of like a lead to the humanity growth, better success and things and that. Okay, yeah, if that thing does not add any kind of like a value or things and that, just kind of like do not recommend such artifact. Okay, yeah, like if the people who are talking about sex, talking about the political, talking about kind of like a religion, hate speeches and things and that, Adam understand that, create the simulation, understand the prediction, and then it kind of like a somebody try to reduce that much thing. Okay, yeah, but if the particular people who are kind of like a talking about something that key, let's just say a particular person who's kind of like a from US citizen who kind of like asks the question regarding about that key, what do I supposed to do by myself to kind of like add value in their country? Okay, that's a really good question. Okay, yeah, because that particular person kind of like a say this thing that he might gonna say, I will not gonna kind of like a create pollution, I will kind of like a somebody the use electric car or whatever the kind of like wafers I will gonna eat, I will kind of like a put that kind of like a plastic into the dustbin. Okay, or kind of like a yeah, kind of like a good things he will kind of like a talk about that, and which is kind of like a really good, because of that when that particular person asks this question, it add a value to the society, to the nation, to the better. If that artifact went viral, it definitely add value, it definitely kind of like a create something that give much more value in the future, much more kind of like a somebody better understanding, much more kind of like a somebody people will kind of like a follow that thing, because artifact is a kind of like a thing is the what are the people who actually talk, higher chances that they will become that particular person, or they will kind of like a do the activity, the stuff that they talk. Okay, yeah, so this is what kind of like a things. So artifact kind of like a, so Adam will kind of like define that key, okay, this particular person, this artifact is really right, it better, it match the kind of like it add value to the society, humanity, nation, country, and it does not kind of like break any kind of like laws and things and that. So recommend to the more and more. Okay, so this particular person artifact is kind of like a recommend, not only recommend to the US, it recommend to the all around the world, like a basically New Zealand to Canada to India to Northeast to kind of like a China to Africa and things and that, literally just like that, because this particular person who talk which add a value to the kind of like a things, it not only add a value to the US, it also add a value to the other countries and things and that. I want that. Okay, yeah, so that is the kind of like a things. Okay, it's been almost like a 42 minutes I'm talking about this thing, but the define is that the question is that he basically is this thing, what kind of like a matter, what metrics are proof that success, how many user I have or how many kind of like things that I have, yeah, that is kind of like a prove my success, but it's a kind of like just one form of success. I am kind of like a focusing on such a success that add value. I want artifact is a kind of like a platform that add value to the people. Artifact it add a value inside of me, that's why I'm creating this platform, that's why I'm kind of like a being here, that's why I'm kind of like a somebody that you are kind of like watching this video, because of I already became something. Okay, you will not gonna watch the video that I didn't really become something. Okay, so it add so much amount of value in me, the person that I am became today, it is because of artifact. Okay, and I also want that people should supposed to be utilize artifact for right purposes, not wrong purposes. Obviously I am holding so much amount of power, okay, yeah, that I could manipulate the millions of people thought process and things and that, but I wanted to utilize that power for right purposes, not wrong purposes. Obviously the government will kind of like a scared of me because of I have this much amount of power, and they will try to steal that power. Okay, why they kind of like add so much regulation and things and that. But if you add a regulation on me or on my kind of like a company or things and that, what will gonna happen, the way that I wanted to provide as much as better, I can't provide that much better. Why? Because let me tell you what is going to happen. If the people have kind of like a take control of what they will kind of like a say, they will say shit, literally they will talk shit in the artifact if I don't really have regulation or control or kind of like give the guidelines and things like that. Because people are talk about things like, let me tell you one thing now, why does people will kind of like a talk about something that kind of like doesn't really add value? Because people are kind of like a focus on kind of like instant growth. Okay, yeah, example, a particular person who's kind of like a talk about a kind of like a sex, that he is a kind of like a mention that he kind of like a had a sex two girl at the same time. Now it's kind of like a sound so dreamy to kind of like a listen this artifact, and obviously so many people will kind of like a listen this artifact. Okay, yeah, and because of so many people are listening this artifact, so many people can do the same thing. If they are getting consent, fine. If they are not getting consent, they are kind of like a doing the rape. Do you understand what exactly is this thing? So that's the kind of like a things. If the government are kind of like a give me a kind of like a regulation or things and that and that and that, then I can't control those citizen of the people. And if I can't control those people, they will kind of like a somebody, they will utilize the artifact for definitely wrong purposes. And in that situation, that artifact will kind of like a become wrong. It will kind of like a become as a kind of like a virus that literally crippled from inside. If I'm kind of like a things and that. Obviously government will also kind of like a scared, like a basically is this thing that US government will kind of like a say this thing, I will not gonna give the power, or maybe kind of like a, they will ban the entire application. Okay, yeah, but the problem will not gonna solve, because if they ban my application, the citizen of the US, they will kind of like a create the similar application. Okay, yeah, and they will kind of like a do the same thing. Okay, yeah, it's not about just a kind of like a, my application is kind of like a something unique in itself, nothing really at all. My application provides the kind of like a just a audio recording that kind of like a collect the sound and kind of like a showing like a YouTube does, like example. Okay, right, it's same as it is. If the government kind of like a block my application or ban the application, the US people will kind of like a create their own artifact application. They will also talk about something shit. And why they will talk about something really shit is because of that they don't understand what is at least this thing. Because I am the experienced person, I've been through artifact, I talk about something shit in the previous past, and I realize that what is actually matter. Okay, yeah, because the a kind of like a particular company who kind of like a copy my idea and create the application and kind of like a run their application in their country, what they are kind of like a focusing on money. Okay, so if they are kind of like focusing on money, they don't really care about what does people say and things and that. They just kind of like let the people talk about the sex, let the people talk about the politics, let the people talk about the religious hate and things and that. They will not gonna care what they will kind of say. I am just provide the platform. They people are talking about the shit. What do I supposed to say? Okay, yeah. And why they will kind of like say this thing? Because they don't really have experience regarding about what is actually artifact, what is actually does. Okay, so that is the kind of like things. At least for me to kind of like somebody is this thing that key, at least for me to kind of like a control for at least like a 10-20 year, at least like a 10 year, at least like a decade. Okay, because if I control the people for at least like a decade, then people will understand the value. There will people realize that okay, artifact is kind of like adding their value, then I am completely free after the 10 year. Because of that, people will kind of like take care of the artifact. They will kind of like serious regarding about what is actually what they should supposed to be say. Like basically this thing right now I am kind of like talking about this thing, which is kind of like a much more responsible way to record artifact. But previously, almost like a decade ago, I was kind of like talking shit in the artifact. I talk about kind of like a sex, I talk about like, yeah, I did talk about, and I'm kind of like somebody is this thing that I am not proud of that, but I kind of like mention a lot of people names. I kind of like heard a lot of people thought process and things and hurt mentality, like directly, indirectly, I did that thing. And that is a kind of like a things. Okay, yeah. That's why I am kind of like really scared to kind of like give the ownership rights to someone else. That's why I'm really scared that the kind of like any other kind of like a government kind of like had a regulation on me, on my company, to kind of like how you perform and things like that. Okay, I am really understand people actually scared. Government will kind of like scared because the when particular person who hold that much amount of power, government definitely scared. And I am literally sharing, I am kind of like sharing information to the government, to their things, that key what exactly the citizen of the people are talking about that thing. I will kind of like share this information to the government, but also I am making sure that the government are also legit too, because people will kind of the government also utilize their citizen information for wrong purposes too. So I have to be understand that key, is this government is actually legit or not. So that's the kind of like a thing. That's a kind of like a very big fucked up shit. Okay. So yeah, artifact is a kind of like a some big responsibility, because it shaped the human. It shaped the human. Because of that, Naki, I realized that कि a normal human and people who kind of like a record artifact, what is actually their difference? So massive difference. Physical point of perspective, you can't see any kind of like a difference at all. But the person who kind of like a record artifact, being responsible, being aware of that, what is actually particular person say and things and that. Particular person who didn't really record artifact, they just kind of like a fumble. They will kind of like a take the decision regarding about what is actually important or right or spur of the moment at that thing. But particular person who record the artifact, they are kind of like a control, understand responsibility and things and that. Artifact shape humanity. Artifact is actually kind of like such a platform where like humans are actually evolved. We are kind of like we've been in such a situation that key everything is a kind of like a went to smartphones, smart computer, whatever it is. But the humans are became dumb. Okay, artifact is a kind of like a things that platform that it does not make people smart, no, but it make people aware of what are they and what kind of like a they are. I don't know, maybe I am completely wrong, things and that. Artifact is a kind of like a platform where billions of people will record artifact. Billions, not just kind of like a couple of 100 million, billions in all over the country and things and that. Okay, and because of it kind of like a things, the self-reflection process, it kind of like add value in them. I will create the kind of like a new form of humans that understand, aware of their actions and things and that. It's a kind of like a transformation. Artifact is actually transforming people to kind of like much more better. Who is actually better? Decide by who? That is a kind of like a question. Because not every people will kind of like utilize artifact for right purposes. They will kind of utilize for wrong purpose and things and that. Right? There are so many challenges in front of me, and I am kind of like a really like a things. So for me, point of perspective, what is actually the success of this application? Is it money? Yeah, I wanted to earn money. It's not really that I don't really wanted to earn money, but the bigger picture is that kind of like a shaping the people to the better future. Okay, yeah. If I am successfully able to do this thing, that is my metrics of success in the artifact. But it's the path is very difficult, very difficult. I have to be kind of like a fight with the governments and things and that. Yeah, sometime I might gonna fail too. Like, or maybe are you stupid? Like basically, artifact will not gonna go that thing. Well, that is fine too. Like basically, if the artifact is not really went viral or kind of like a couple of hundreds of thousands of people are utilizing artifact, I am fine. Okay, yeah. Because of that, if I don't really have to control millions and billions of people, then I am also fine. I'm completely fine, by the way, because I don't really have that many tension or any kind of like a responsibility to kind of like a handling the millions of billions of people. If I have kind of like a couple of thousands of people who are kind of like a recording artifact and they are really good and things, I'm fine, good. Yeah, sure. Okay, yeah. But still, artifact will kind of like cross millions and billions and things like that and that. So it's a big responsibility. Yeah. This is it. It's been 53 minutes. Oh my god. Thank you.